Welcome to the non-musician's intro to digital music composition. This time we'll be talking about breaking up chord progressions, making them a little more interesting than just standard block chords. So I have my same project file open from last time, and I'm just going to get rid of this bass line here and keep the melody. So I'll drag out a MIDI clip and get started. We use the same progression since that's what the melody was written for, but I'm going to lower the velocity of these notes. And if you lower the velocity of a note and then select it, like so, the next notes you write will have that same velocity. Good way to keep things consistent. So D minor chord. Might lower that an octave. Yeah. No. It can be tricky doing full-on chords with these simple synths sometimes. I'm going to lower the pulse width of this square wave, and that'll make it a little nicer for a chord. Okay, copy this, paste it, drag it down to A sharp. Because we have the scale lock on from the previous lesson, it auto-changed this chord from a minor chord into a major chord to keep the notes consistent. My cat says hi. Then paste this again. See, in this case it auto-corrected the note down. We actually want it to go up to be C major. And then lastly, A minor. That's a little loud. I'm just going to lower the track volume slightly. Slightly more. That's great, but it's no different than having the bass line, at least not rhythmically. As a general rule, your listener only needs to hear the start of the chord, and they should hear the start of the chord pretty quickly, but they will remember it until the chord changes, at least subconsciously. That is about the same harmonically, but there's a lot more space in the mix because the chord just pulses and then it's open. So you can use this as a way to change texture. So your first section, for example, copy and paste this, drag this out. Your first section could have block chords as normal. With the second section, having the shorter chords. And that is a very good way to make it immediately apparent that this is a new section, and here comes some new material. Those kind of very apparent texture changes are a very good way to keep your songs interesting. And because the chord progression is the same, it's not jarring in the least. But it very clearly sounds like new material, keeps the song fresh. Another way to do this is to mess with the rhythm of the chords. These are still block chords, they're just very short. So you can have this first one go 3 times, and the second one maybe goes just once, and then you have another one go 3 times, and then just once again. By the way, holding control, hitting the arrow keys lets you adjust the position of notes ever so slightly. You could have these hold or repeat again, or be shorter or longer. It's just another way for you to mess around with your chord progressions and make them a little more interesting rhythmically. But that's enough about block chords. Arpeggios are functionally similar. You have the same notes, and harmonically it's the same, but it's much busier. So This isn't... I normally wouldn't do this with this melody because this melody is pretty active, so it's going to sound a little bit crowded. But arpeggiating a chord progression is another good way to make it immediately apparent that there's new material. And likewise, because the chord progression is the same as the first section, the transition won't be jarring. It'll just sound cool. Arpeggios are a very good way to sort of just add movement to a section of your song. Played in that order, I think it actually works well, because this arpeggiated section is kind of sparse in the sense that there's not a lot of heavy sounds, because there's not a lot of harmony, basically. These are playing very similar notes, in fact identical notes, it's just that the chords here are inverted, and then you have this melody over it, and then the full chords come in, and the harmony within the chord really fills out the lower end of the song. And that kind of going from narrow range of frequencies to all frequencies is sort of a general way to do song intros. That's why, you know, a song's opening usually starts with like one instrument playing a melody, or maybe a quick drum fill, something like that, and then everything comes in, because it's very jarring to have a song start like this. Just everything all at once. In general, also, just adding, removing tracks is a pretty good way to do intros. Have one track, you know, fewer tracks than in your main part. Likewise for endings, if you repeat your chorus but remove a track, that's a pretty solid way to do an ending. But we're supposed to be talking about chords, so let's talk about chords. Up till now, we've been sticking to one chord per measure. I'll close this arpeggio thing and open the block chords. We've got chord, 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 just like that. And that's fine. That's a lot of songs do that. But opening a new MIDI clip here, we can do something a little more interesting. We can have one chord. We'll just do D minor here. We can have this chord last a measure and a half, and then have a half measure chord here, say F major, and then have another long chord. We'll use A sharp, and then another half measure chord here. We'll use C major. Like so. I'm going to, if you click and drag here, makes a time selection. That will only loop this part. And it's looping because I have this button here clicked. So that's good. That's good stuff. More rhythmically interesting for sure. And having a section be like this and another section have a rhythm like this is subtler. For example, as I've talked about before, you wouldn't want to transition just like this between the two, because it's not immediately apparent that the section has changed. Although I guess in this case it is, because this has a lower velocity than this, so it does sound different. But you want your distinctions to be more obvious than that. So this section does follow well after this section, because it goes from arpeggios to block chords. I also like, this is going in the other direction, from this light section to a heavy chords but nothing else. Very heavy in the low frequencies, and then nothing in the high frequencies, no melody at all. That's another effective transition, and something a little different from going into the full-on in everything, like this section. Essentially, you want your sections to be as different as you can get away with. But, chords, again. This kind of lopsided chord rhythms, they give you a lot more wiggle room with your melodies because the chords are set for longer. So normally in your melodies you want to have room for your audience to hear the chord change, which is why, you know, a little silence like here is good. You can hear the chord change and then on with the melody. And with this, you have more room to play with your melody in this first measure and a half, then you have a quick break, the chord changes, and then you fill out a little more of the melody here before going back into it. This is good because it sort of forces you to play with more interesting rhythmic patterns for your melodies, and as I've said before, coming up with a good rhythm for your melody is one of the hardest parts of writing a melody. The pitches are generally easier to handle. With that being said, you got your staccato chords, you got your arpeggiated chords, and then you've got extending your chords beyond one measure and having shorter chords like this. You can also do break up your chord progression with more than 4 chords, such as having this drop down to G minor and then go up to C major. So you have 5 chords in this progression. And that's more interesting. I'm not going to talk about different kinds of chords yet. We're going to stick with major and minor, but that will come into play too. I'm going to go ahead and end this lesson here. I just want to keep it focused on rhythm in chord progressions. So thank you for watching, and stay tuned.